Welcome to the show, Michael. I'm excited to have you here because I feel like your topic of expertise is is sort of a skill I see people losing these days. Maybe it's social media. Maybe it's that we all have our own billboards on our feeds or pages. But what guided you to focus so much of your life on the ideas of active listening?
Appreciate you having me, Melissa. Thank you very much. And you're right. It does feel like losing our listening skills is kind of an epidemic, so to speak. But that's also assuming we ever had them to begin with. And there's probably a fun debate that we could have there. But my journey to get here has been winding, unexpected, and unintentional. So I started out as a secondary, so like middle school and high school special education teacher, ended up in the financial industry for a while before I got into investigations. And that started as a part-time job before it burned wildly out of control and got ahead of me. And eventually my investigations career led to a focus really on interview and interrogation. And I know a lot of people hear those words and think what they see on TV or they read in the news. And reality is, for somebody to be a successful investigative interviewer, what they really need to do is establish an unexpected relationship with somebody at a sensitive or vulnerable moment in time and be able to engage with them at a level where they can protect their self-image in order to share sensitive information under vulnerable circumstances in the face of consequences. And so that is really what led me to honing the strategic observation, what we now call the disciplined listening skills, the enhanced questioning skills, all of those things. But it's not about those gotcha moments. It's about really working hard to understand where somebody is, where they're coming from, what are their fears or motivations, and how do we work through any conversation together.
Hmm. How do you I'm going to just dive right into it. How do you do that without almost feeling like you're trapping them? And I'm thinking of a friend who it's so interesting. I love watching her talk to people because she asks the best questions. But I've also noticed that sometimes when I talk to her, I'm like, well, I feel like you're trying to guide me into a trap. And so I like watching her do it with other people, but it doesn't always feel good when I'm engaged with it. And so sometimes it just feels like when you're really trying to understand, it's almost like, yeah, do you know what I'm getting at with this?
I think I do. I'll give you my
Yeah.
answer, then you can tell me
Yeah.
if I'm going where you want me to or not. So, really, when it comes to communication, communication, when we do it really well, is a counterpart focused effort. So, if I go into any interaction thinking, okay, what do I need to say? What do I need to ask? What do I want to get out of this? And part of that, of course, we have to consider, but that's all selfishly focused on me. So now I'm more likely to give you those negative feelings because the questions I ask could be unnecessarily accusatory. They could feel like they're trapped. They could put you in a corner where you feel like you have no good way out. So, really, what we want to do is we want to remain outcome focused. And those outcomes shouldn't necessarily just be short term, they should be short and long term. So, this applies to business and personal life. If I'm engaging with my wife and my son, well, the goal is long term. Like, how do we keep these relationships happy and healthy and supportive forever? Not just how do we solve whatever issues in front of us now. And a lot of times in business, the same is true ish, where it shouldn't just be, how do I get the answer to this question? But it's, well, where does this relationship take me? They work for me, they work with me. Like, we somehow have this partnership. Like, where's this partnership leading us? So, by maintaining that outcome focus first and then thinking, okay, what does Melissa need to experience so she will choose to tell me this? So it's not what do I need to say, it's what do you need to experience. And for the most part, people need to be able to save face and protect their self-image. End of story. Oftentimes, when we're working with people, either on a relationship level or a community-based level or a business level, whatever it is, if they're trying to get somebody to change or to see things differently, somehow, some way that comes across as you're doing it the wrong way. You're looking at it the wrong way. You need to do it this way. So that's like taking somebody's direction of travel. You are currently traveling north. You need to stop, turn around, and go south. That's a lot of effort emotionally, cognitively, physically to do that. Instead, if they're already traveling north, we want to use that northward direction of travel, keep them going north at the beginning, and then start giving them the opportunities to turn themselves around as the conversation goes. So that way they feel like their communication is in line with their self image, how they see themselves thinking, talking, acting in similar situations. So if we can focus on outcomes, especially the long term strategic ones, the value of the relationship and beyond, and then really help people save face and protect their self image by creating the communication experiences they need. Now, a lot of that, for lack of a better word, icky feeling at the end of the conversation, I don't think I like where you're taking me, starts to go away because we're also giving them control of the conversation. We're giving them agency over the information that they share as opposed to forcing it from them.
Mm. So we've done quite a few episodes on different aspects of listening, but I was intrigued by you because you have some points I've never exactly heard before. Like, one thing that might shock some people is you say that it's actually okay to be lied to sometimes. So explain that.
Much time do we have? So I'm not here to advocate for lying, right? Like I'm not waving the flag of a dishonest society. That's not what I'm doing. However, there's plenty of research out there that shows that within a certain set of parameters, lying is necessary for society to function. And when we look at us as individuals, we've all told lies before. Now we can debate on the necessity and the morality and the ethical nature of all
Are
these
you
things.
defending our government right now?
No, under no circumstances, neither party. I'm not defending any of them at all. In fact, I'll take a different track with them. Thankfully, that's not what this conversation is about. But whether it's something as benign as, yes, that food tasted great, or something far more cynical, we've all bent the truth at some point in our lives. But it's important that we look at the reason why we do that. So if we take away the medical diagnoses and the fringe on the spectrum, most of the time, most of us are going to lie to avoid a consequence. That consequence could be real or perceived. It could be, I don't want to get trapped in this conversation. It could be, I don't want to be asked a follow up question. It could be, I don't want this person to feel bad. Like there's lots of reasons. I think Pamela Meyer has the famous TED Talk where she looks at the 9 different motivations why people will lie. It all comes down to we're looking to avoid a consequence. So when somebody lies to us, in most instances, the first thing we should step back and realize is they're not lying to hurt us. They're lying to protect themselves, which essentially means whether we agree with it or not, they are executing what they believe to be their last remaining good decision that they have at that moment in time. I'm not saying I agree, but that's how they feel at the moment. I can't fault them for that. So if I can think about it as they're not trying to hurt me, they're trying to protect themselves. They think it's their last available good decision. And now if I can listen to what they're actually telling me, there's a strong likelihood that the quote unquote lie will have intelligence embedded in it. And if we raise our contextual awareness, if we think about the history that we have with this person in similar situations, whatever it might be, now we can start to get a good idea of what are they afraid of? What are their motivations? And now, if I can start reducing their fear, I can get them closer to telling the truth. Norman Anderson did a research study that's quoted pretty often. He had a group of people rate 555 personality traits. Never met the man, but I feel confident saying 555 might have been a bit of overkill. But essentially, what he asked people to do would be rate, if you were called these 555 words, what word would you rather be called the most? What word would you rather be called the least? Rank them. I want to make sure I get this right. 6 of the top 10 were some derivation of honesty. People love being called honest, good, trustworthy, what have you. Four of the bottom 10 were derivations of dishonesty. People hate being called liars. In fact, liar came in ranked 555th. Liar came in ranked dead last. And the people that hate being called the liars the most, perhaps ironically, are those who are lying. So if we challenge people on lying, all we're doing is forcing them to lie more and we're jeopardizing the relationship. So again, I'm not encouraging dishonesty. Please don't take it that way. But if we realize that for a self-preservation standpoint, lying is a normal part of interpersonal communication. Now, instead of looking at it as a moral offense, which sometimes could be the right way to look at it, but instead of always looking at it as a moral offense, we look at it as somebody trying to protect themselves from a consequence. Okay, what is that consequence? How do I reduce the fear and use the intelligence I gather from the lie to lead them to the truth?
Can you give an example of when you use this in a practical situation in your life?
Yeah, sure. Is there a context that you'd be most interested in? Personal, business,
I don't know. I
investigation?
had like 9 examples come to my head. I thought of my friend who was just a strange pathological liar. I eventually realized she was so much fun, but she would just lie about the weirdest things. We would come back from we hung out a lot in our 20s, and like we'd come back from something, and then she would just like be telling people we were hanging out with a celebrity that night, that just because he was like walked into the club and walked past weird things like that. And eventually it came to a head where I was like, man, as much as I like you when you're not lying, there's too many things. But then I've thought of times where I've lied just because um, I don't know, I don't want to get into big discussions. So I'll usually, if it comes out with me, it's usually like, I'm trying not to lie, so it comes out softly and in one word. Like, did you like this meal? Oh yeah, it was great. That's how you can tell I am. Otherwise, I come with a much more robust answer. But yeah, just trying to think of practical situations, because I think our natural instinct, if someone says, if we realize immediately somebody's lying and it's not to butter us up, it feels like an offense to the relationship. So I'm trying to think of a time where
Well, I
there's
mean,
like kind of a
I
middle
can do a
ground.
couple. I mean, if there's one
Yeah.
you had off the top of your head, I want to do it. By the way, for your pathological liar friend, and I don't have any degrees in psychology, but generally, when people exaggerate, it's because their fear is they won't be respected, admired, revered, thought of highly enough in whatever context. So they exaggerate to get that level of respect, attention, whatever that they feel like they either deserve or want. Now, I can't diagnose where that comes from people. That's way above my pay grade, but generally, that's probably
And
along
daddy
those lines.
issues usually.
Yeah, maybe, maybe. Or where
That's
she
what we
was.
diagnosed, but
There you go. Probably spent enough time with her to have some insight on that one.
yeah.
So, but if I think, and I'll do a couple different ones, I'll try to keep them short. So I have a young son. And let's just say that my young son, hypothetically speaking, might have got himself into a little issue at after school that involved me having to talk to the counselors or chaperones, whoever are out there when I get there. So when I have the conversation with him, he gives me his version of what happened. And I got to give Gabe credit. By and large, he's probably too honest for his own good most of the time, at least at this stage in his life. But I can tell that he's not telling me the whole story. He was probably more of an agitator. He probably acted a little bit further than he says he is, those kinds of things. It can be a knee-jerk reaction as a parent to say, stop lying to me, tell me the truth. I know there's more to the story. What did you really do? Every single one of those responses reinforces to the child that you don't trust me, you don't believe me, AKA, I might doubt how much you love me. And by the way, I should not tell you the truth because very clearly there's consequences associated with that. So when I hear that story, I thank him for telling me. I appreciate you sharing that with me, Gabe. I understand it. You growing up trying to make friends. I was never really good at making friends. I know it can be really frustrating on the playground. I am curious, though, what exactly did Henry say to you before you shoved him? And then when he hesitates, he's like, well, he told me he thought he was stronger than me. And now the whole story starts to unravel. So instead of me attacking him, I thank him for what he shares with me first. It's a little technique we like to call illustrate before you investigate. Then I illustrate kind of some general knowledge of the situation. And I come back and ask him an assumptive question, not did you do it or why did you do it? Because those come across as accusation. Well, did you do it is an accusation, but it also sounds like I might not know. So it makes it easier for someone to double down on the denial. Why did you do it? Might sound like I'm trying to help him save face, but definitely feels like an accusation. When I come back and say, so what did he say to you before you pushed him? When he tells me he pushed him, he's still telling me that he pushed first. But in his mind, he's saving face because he can tell me, well, he said this first. This is why I did it. So now what that helps me do as a parent, of course, there's consequences, right? But now there's a teachable moment in here. What did he say? How did that make you feel? How do we process those emotions? What other alternatives do we have? So now there's a much more valuable conversation to be had than you can't be putting your hands on your friends at after school, put your Nintendo Switch down, you're grounded. Like that's not going to help anybody. If it's more of a business example, This happens quite frequently where maybe we're trying to secure a deal and we feel like the customer isn't being honest about anything, budget, time frame, requirements, whatever it is. I mean, if we just pick one, let's just say time frame. We don't think they're being honest about when this really needs to start and whatever. Now I'm going to come back and say, I appreciate you sharing that with me. Thank you very much. In our experience, one of the things our clients have taught us is that time frames are always flexible based on other priorities. As priorities shift, they might need it quicker. Maybe there's a little bit of a delay. A lot of these things are out of our control. So I am curious, what are the three biggest factors impacting the start date? So now I'm not coming back and saying, stop lying to me. This isn't my first rodeo. I know you're not telling me everything, because all I'm going to do is create an adversarial relationship. To your point about not like feeling like you're backed in, not liking when you feel like you're being backed into a corner. Nobody likes to feel like they're interrogated. Nobody likes to feel like they're being observed at that detailed a degree. So if I can give them a way out, again, that illustrate before you investigate. Our clients have taught us that often this is flexible. Priorities change, dates shift. That's the world we live in. So now I'm curious, what are the top three obstacles that could impact the start date for this project? Now it's not about them. It's not about them lying to me. They've got a way to save face, and we found a side entrance into the conversation.
Okay, I can see that perfectly now. And I can see that coming in very helpful with my kiddo. Because honestly, there's been times with my two little boys where I, at first, I want to get on my 4-year-old because he's bigger and he's the one pushing or whatever. But then I'm like, what happened just before this? I've actually done that just intuitively. Like, what did did you think he deserved it? Like, why did you think he deserved it? And sometimes I'm like, all right, yeah, I would have pushed him too. But yeah, it does make sense.
And that buys you grace with your kids. Kids need to be punished, and they need to learn boundaries, and they need to learn consequences and all these things. Like, I'm not saying that we should live in a consequence-free world. Are your brother standing at the top of the stairs? Give him a shove. Like, we can't be doing these things. But it buys credibility with our kids when we approach it that way. Like, there's times where I've talked to Gabe and Gabe was out of line. He shoved somebody, he tackled somebody, he did something he shouldn't have done. He watched me through it. And by the way, please walk me through is my favorite question to ask in almost any situation. So I probably dropped that right there. But he watched me through it. And when he does, I'm like, I probably would have hit that kid too. I'll say it. So you know what, Gabe? I can't blame you. I probably would have hit him there too. But would I have been right or wrong if I hit him? Well, you'd have been wrong. You're not allowed to do that at school. Exactly. So now let's talk through how we handle our emotions the next time we're in a similar situation. It buys us credibility as opposed to always being that perfect individual who's pontificating.
Mm. You talk about listening for intelligence rather than just information. What does that actually mean when you're in a real conversation?
Thank you. All too often, we find ourselves in the check the box mentality. We expect somebody to say a certain thing, or we feel like we need somebody to say a certain thing to open up a door to achieve our preordained next step. This is what I want them to say so I can ask them this question. This is what I want them to say so I can make them this offer. This is what I want them to ask so I can accept or reject. And we live in that check the box mentality. We are closing out options and alternatives. So we're actually, what's the word I'm looking for? Where I'm going to miss it. So whatever. We're turning away opportunities instead of welcoming in opportunities. We're being exclusionary as opposed to inclusionary. Those probably weren't the words either, but I'm done trying. So an example, again, to try to do some examples, if I am having a conversation with my wife about our plans for this weekend, I know we've got sports. I know maybe she has some plans that she has with one of her friends, or maybe she has an appointment or something. Maybe I want to try to sneak the motorcycle out of the garage for a little while. So if I just go in thinking, okay, I think my window to do something might be Sunday afternoon. So if I go in and say, hey, do you have any plans for Sunday afternoon? She says, no, I don't. Great. Now I just totally closed out the window of opportunities, as opposed to if I sit down and I say, hey, it's Thursday, weekend's coming up between Gabe's sports and our schedules. I just want to kind of sit down and get planned out. What would be important for you to accomplish this weekend? Now I've opened it up. And when she answers, to get back to listening to intelligence, if she says something like quick and with confidence, I want to make sure we get the Halloween decorations up. Well, I need to make sure before I try to do anything else, those Halloween decorations are up because clearly she said that quickly and assertively. That means it's important to her. Then later on, and if there was time, I wouldn't mind trying to get a yoga class in. Okay, cool. Like so now I'm getting intelligence because it's not just what's on the list. It's how does she feel about these alternatives or these opportunities, and based on how she feels about them now impacts how I prioritize them. So when we talk about listening to intelligence for intelligence, a lot of it is staying out of the check the box mentality, getting back to understanding outcomes. What are the larger goals that we want to keep in mind at any point in time? But then what are the emotional content of people's answers? So whether that is with their tone of voice, whether that's with their facial expression and body language, whether that's with their pauses, their volume, all of these things, what's the emotional connotation with what people say? Sometimes it's even the emotional connotation with their word choice. If somebody says, I would really like to versus I have to, that's two different emotional connotations there. So depending on what they're saying, I might give more weight to one or the other in the context of the situation.
Mm, I love that because especially in relationships and especially in transitions in relationships, for some reason, I kept getting visuals of the first year after we had our first child. I didn't realize how many expectations I had of myself for just never leaving my baby. And there was a period of time where I really couldn't. I was breastfeeding, I wasn't pumping enough, and so about 6 months where I couldn't leave for longer than an hour or so. But then it started getting to the point where I was just so used to I didn't feel I hesitate to use the word deserving, but I feel like there was an undertone of deserving to get away and do something for myself. Like my obligation was here with my child. And I will always be so thankful to my husband for reading that undertone and being the one to say, no, go down the mountain. We have to drive down the mountain for good stuff here, but go down the mountain, go to a yoga class. Like you've got the milk. We can handle this. And I was like, really? And it felt so difficult, but I wouldn't ask. And it takes that extra layer of listening, almost like coaching of like, okay, whether you're coaching yourself or somebody else, yeah, this is the surface desire, but what's underneath that? Let's dive 7 layers deeper, which helps you get to it. So I really appreciate that kind of
You're good. I was gonna say pick up right where you left off. I'm tracking. We're good.
okay, there we go.
Cool.
And
I got
so
to sneak a drink of
just
water.
yeah, just that tracking of the internal situation, but you also talk about knowing what's happening in the room being more important than just the listening techniques that we use. Tell me about that.
Will, and I want to circle back to something that you had in your last answer that's extremely important and it gets overlooked a lot. You talked about expectations and whether they're expectations of ourselves or expectations of others. Often our expectations serve as our both our like our beacon, our GPS. They direct where we focus our attention, what we say, what we do, but they also serve as our first filter. So if I expect somebody to behave, to answer, respond in a certain way, and they respond in a different way, I'm not necessarily getting upset, disappointed, angry at them. I'm getting upset, angry, disappointed because it violated my expectations. They did something differently than I expected them to do. So often, when we're looking at how we are interpreting communication, one of the very first things we have to do is check our expectations because our expectations could be misaligned with the situation, with the person, with their expectations, and could be creating some of this unhealthy or unnecessary or accidental emotional disconnect that we get into. Understanding the power and checking our expectations, not only for ourselves, but for others, is a very, very, very important component of all of this. So I'm glad you worked that into your story because it's a very important piece to consider. So now, if I actually flash back to your question about, I hate to oversimplify it, but reading the room, currently recency bias at its finest. Working with a client who has a working relationship that when it is just the two of them, they're fine. But as soon as there are other people in the room, Now there's a personality conflict and there's a power struggle and some of these other things that happen. So, one of the things that we like to preach, and depending on your preference, either one is fine with me, context is king, context is queen. The context of the situation is often the most important or has the greatest impact on anything that's happening at that moment in time. Sometimes the context is behind the scenes, sometimes the context is what's happening right now. So, if we think about what's going on in the room around us. Some of it could be simple impact of nonverbals. One of the myths that drives me up a wall sideways is when somebody crosses their arms, they're closed off, they're defensive. Well, maybe they could also be cold. Did the air conditioner just kick on? Are they sitting next to a window? Like, did the wind just pick up? Like, let's use our situational awareness. Have they been sitting in the same chair for 45 minutes and it's hurting their back? Like, there's lots of reasons why somebody might cross their arms. In a social setting, if I'm out to dinner with my wife and we're having a conversation and all of a sudden she crosses her arms, is it because she's defensive about something I just said? Or did the creepy waiter just stand way too close? Like, these types of contextual awareness, so important to understand what's really happening. But it's also the power of who else is in the room as well. Because how people behave when they're alone, how people behave when they're in front of a crowd, and how people behave when they're in front of specific other individuals can change drastically. My son is getting to the age now where how he behaves if there's a girl around might change a little bit different, and how he might behave depending on which one of his friends or teammates is around might be a little bit different. So understanding these things, even like I know I keep bringing up my wife and son. I'm happy to do more business analogies. Take this anywhere you want. But even when I call my wife to see how her day is she avoiding my question because she's upset with me? Or is she avoiding my question because there is somebody sitting across from her desk? Like, so understanding what's going on in the room around is paramount to trying to get at the root of any situation. Communication doesn't happen in a vacuum, and all of these things can be impacting how you behave, how I interpret it.
Well, an insight into me, if I'm avoiding your question, it's because I know you're not going to like the answer and I'm hoping you'll forget. But no, I appreciate the family responses because those are most pertinent to me. And I think a lot of people too. And I have found that those intimate relationships sometimes help even more deeply with even coworkers and less intimate relationships because it's the surface level, it's surface compared to depth. And so there's some differences, but it's like you can take it so much further. And as you get to know people, you can just sort of travel down that line of what's important. But yeah, it's interesting too when you meet somebody who clearly has like read some networking books and they've taken it as gospel. I can't help but think of this super quirky guy I met earlier this year in January at this retreat. And he was just one of those people like, like shaking your hand super aggressively and then like staring at you in the eyes. And almost everybody was so uncomfortable with him because I'm like, okay, you read like How to Win Friends and Influence People and you took everything to level 10. And now it's like hard to be around you because I don't know if you're actually listening to me or just leaning in and staring into my soul without even seeing it.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for smothering me with your insecurities by overcompensating with all of the techniques you read in the book. There was a guy that I met recently who would never know. We actually had a bit of an interaction, but I wouldn't expect him to remember. I'd actually seen him speak once before and had sort of made some assumptions and judgments having watched him speak. Might have been right or wrong, fair or unfair. And then I walk in. Now I'm speaking at an event for an organization that he works for. I didn't realize he worked for this organization. Now he walks up, clearly doesn't remember me. Same thing, shakes my hand. And the first words out of his mouth are, "It's very nice to meet you. Clearly we go to the same barber. He's a great guy." Now, if people are listening and not watching, I'm bald. I've been bald for 30 years. Literally, I think I've been bald for 30 years at this point. Said he was bald as well. And to your point, I'm like, awesome. So thank you for the most insincere greeting of all time. Now I know you've done no research, no preparation. You don't know anything about me. You don't really care about me. You're just trying to artificially create this friendship. So if you can just pull me towards the front of the room, I'll be fine.
My husband and I did a timeshare presentation and it was so funny because I'm this was when he realized that he takes the wheel if it's a sales situation, because you can sell me anything. I don't know why. I don't even want the thing. I just don't want to hurt your feelings. And I want you to feel like a winner by the end. So I'll just buy into it and then like return it as soon as I can. We didn't know this about each other. It was early on, but we had this saleswoman, and she was looking at all of our stuff and she's like, "Oh, we have the same birthday." And afterwards we realized, I almost guarantee she says that to everybody. She just wanted to make it seem symbiotic that we were sitting next to each other. So we did get a really cute gift basket before we returned our timeshare within the 3-day window, but that's
Nice.
neither here nor there. Well, you talk about these core behaviors for disciplined listening. What are some of the most important and relevant for people?
I appreciate you asking. We've actually already touched on a couple of them. So the first one is really trying to understand how any interaction, especially you've talked about intimate relationships. So these iterative relationships that we have with people who are in our life, how does any interaction not just help us get closer to solving our short-term goals, but our long-term goals as well, and really keeping that outcome-focused mentality. So that's the first one. It's right there. The second one that's might be a little bit of a shift for people is when we're building our communication strategies, build them based on our threats and obstacles. Don't build them based on our perceived strengths. So I think many of us were taught to prepare for an important conversation by thinking about, okay, why should somebody do whatever it is that I want them to do? Well, if I was trying to sell you something, hypothetically speaking, a timeshare that maybe I could just keep you busy for 4 days and then you wouldn't be able to return it after. If I start thinking, well, why should Melissa buy a timeshare? Now I'm actually transposing my perspective, my biases, my expectations onto you. But if I stop and think, okay, why shouldn't Melissa want to buy this timeshare? Now I can have a painfully honest conversation with myself about all the reasons why this might not work. The next question that I would ask is, why hasn't Melissa already bought a timeshare? So now I'm looking at present tense and past tense. So from a strategic prep standpoint, I'm constantly asking myself, why shouldn't they want to do this? And why haven't they already? I use the answers to those two questions to get back to something we've already discussed. Keeping these answers in mind, what does she have to experience before she chooses to? So it's all about creating the experience that other people need, not based on why I think you should do it, but by why you probably think you shouldn't do it. The next one is, I don't know, there's probably lots of jokes we could wrap around it, but stay patient. In fact, I would argue that patience is probably the single greatest listening related skill. And one of the best ways to stay patient is to stay outcome focused, because if the outcome is valuable enough, we will stay patient. If the outcome isn't valuable enough, we'll lose patience. And often, if we find ourselves in a situation, which might have only happened to me roughly 1.5 million times in my life, where we've said something we'd immediately like to have back, it's probably because our emotions in the moment overrode the outcome. So at that moment in time, satisfying our emotions was more important than achieving the outcome. So when we stay patient and we let the conversation come to us, we collect more data, we collect more intelligence, we find new opportunities to establish these relationships to make people feel comfortable sharing information. But we got to stay outcome focused to do that. Again, maybe another counterproductive one when people hear that I come from an investigative interviewing background, again, you touched on it earlier, thank you, is we don't want to try to catch people lying. There's all kinds of research and statistics that tell us that that path is fraught with peril, but it also jeopardizes relationships, creates biases, all these other things. What we really want to observe for are changes in somebody's comfort level. If we're having a conversation and all of a sudden the other person is more or less comfortable than they were a second ago, I want to be able to pick up on that and try to understand why. Okay, what just changed? Was it something they said, I said, something happened in the room? Why did their comfort level change? And then adapt. Based on this new intelligence, I saw your comfort level change. Am I going to keep going in the right direction? Am I going to change my direction? Am I going to table this topic or conversation for another time? These are all options. We've already talked about helping people save face, which is critical, perhaps the most critical thing. If you want somebody to open up and share sensitive information under vulnerable circumstances in the face of consequences, they have to save face. And the last one, it gets overlooked too, is find opportunities between conversations to build trust equity. If we only reach out to somebody every time we need something, if there's no interaction in between, gaps in time create doubt in relationships. So the more consistent we can be in our communication, the more evidence we provide that we did listen and that we are trustworthy, it will be easier for people to open up to us.
Mm. Going back to the one um, where you talked about sort of perceiving shifts in body language that might represent their comfort level. Would it be too forward to ask something like, I actually just noticed a shift. Did something, I'd love to know what you're feeling right now or what's coming out, or does that feel too strategic to people?
Yeah, I would more often than not, I would probably coach to stay away from it. Now it depends. Depends on your relationship with the person. It depends on what you're talking about in that moment, the context of the situation. Like there could be a set of details that make that a perfect question to ask at that moment in time. Generally, I would say stay away from it. The number one reason, and we kind of touched on it, was people don't love feeling like you're paying attention to every little detail of my communication. So if I was to say, "Oh, it looks like all of a sudden you're uncomfortable. I'm curious as to why." Well, whoa, whoa, now I'm more uncomfortable because you're watching
Your
me and
left
you're
pupil dilated, and I'm.
yeah, yeah.
Are you attracted to me?
You keep scratching your nose. Is something wrong? Why did you shift in your chair like that? It puts people more on the defensive, and that's the opposite of what we want. So generally when we make the observation, I would say find a side door and probably not immediately. So if I see your behavior change, that probably changed, not necessarily, it might have, well, statistically, there's a likelihood that it changed at the peak of that emotion, right? So whatever emotion you were feeling, your behavior likely changed at the peak of it. Not for certain, but more likely than not. So if right after the peak of that emotion, which you still might be experiencing, I shoot in a question about it, that's probably not going to be helpful. So if I see that comfort shift, I want to register it. And now I want to come back to it, maybe in a minute, maybe in 2 minutes, maybe tomorrow. Again, it's all contextually different. But now I might come back and say, I've got to maybe something along the lines of, I got to take a step back and realize that I could be seeing this and honestly making assumptions about this topic in from a much different perspective than you. I'm curious how you feel about it.
That's a good way to.
So now I'm not doing it at the peak of their emotion. So that gotcha moment isn't there. There's a little bit of a mea culpa on my part. I wouldn't encourage people to apologize for things that aren't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. Don't apologize. But I can step back and say, I got to be honest for a second. I've been approaching this from my point of view. I might not have the complete story. I'm curious, how do you feel about it? And now by asking the question that way, how do you feel? I'm asking a question that's got the emotional connotation to it to give them the opportunity to feel safe for opening up and even just listen to how they say it. So, well, I guess I'm kind of feeling a little disappointed. Maybe they're not quite sure, that hesitation and that question mark, or maybe they're trying to choose the right word so they don't upset us with their response. So maybe it's more than a little disappointed, right? Maybe they're kind of angry, but they don't want to leave, they don't want to show all of those cards. So even listening to get back to listening to intelligence, how they answer the question, I'm curious as to how you feel right now, can give us an indication of what are they showing us versus what's really going on behind the scenes.
It's helpful because I think so often we there's times in situations where I feel very researched in a topic, and I know that the person I'm talking to hasn't looked into it as much as I am. So I feel like I am not as interested in what they have to say. And I'm just being honest in some of my less good moments. But the thing is, if you're in a conversation with them and you're sharing your point of view and you want any level of persuasion, it's very difficult to persuade people that don't feel heard. And so just because you might have researched it enough to probably know the ins and outs of the alternative point of view doesn't mean that they know that you see that. And so you can even see that so clearly in political arguments. I did a sort of challenge for myself back in 2020 when I was feeling very judgmental of the other side. And and I just wanted to talk to everybody on the other side to release my judgment. And I was not expecting it to swing me right towards the middle. I was like, I had all the wrong assumptions about this other side. We essentially want the same thing. We just have very different ways of getting there. And there's some really valid points over here. Do I trust the people that are leading us with this plan? No, I don't at all. So why do I feel like this is the solution? And so I think that happens a lot, even just in personal conversations. People don't know that you know their side. And to be fair, you might think you have the ins and outs of their side because you've researched it, but you've again researched it from your side and from other people like you that have a similar point of view. And so you're missing a lot of the nuances.
Nuances is a very important word. Is whether we're talking politics, personal opinions, it could be any debate in our family, at work, whatever. The nuance is often the most important. And when we get down to the nuance, we probably have more in common than we realize. We probably want very similar, if not the same outcomes than we realize. So now getting back to how we structure and frame that conversation is so important. One issue that we run into often is the rational emotional disconnect. If we've done a lot of research, we feel like we're well versed on an issue, we end up trying to solve somebody else's emotional problem with a rational conversation.
Mm.
That would be like saying, hey, Mike, here's a screw and a hammer. Well, it's probably not going to help me. I'd rather have a screwdriver in order to do the job. So if and it happens all the time, trying to solve emotional problems with rational solutions generally doesn't work. And the flip is true as well, but we don't see the flip side as much as we do people trying to force a rational solution onto an emotional topic. So that's one. And also in those scenarios, in fairness to you, the human brain is wired to seek out information that makes us feel more comfortable. It's in line what we already think, believe, and feel. And the brain is wired to disregard information that contradicts that. So we have to consciously work hard to override that. People talk, stay curious, stay empathetic, remain present. Well, yeah, I would love to do all those things, but if we're being honest, the brain wasn't created in a way that makes that really easy if we're being honest with ourselves. So that's why if we can stay more focused on the outcome, how valuable is the relationship? How valuable is the initiative, whatever it might be, that we can solve or create together? How valuable is this potential education to me? We could go on and on with examples, but allowing the other person to go first can make it easier for us to learn. So if I'm well researched, I think I got all my ducks in a row, I'm ready to go. And I start by saying, hey, Melissa, I got a few things I'd like to read you in on. Well, now I'm dictating the direction of the conversation. I'm likely causing you to be more defensive, become more emotional. Now you're going to probably communicate things that you wouldn't have otherwise. Whereas if I force myself to come at it from a position of curiosity and say, hey, Melissa, I've been reading about XYZ, trying to educate myself on it. But regardless of what I think I've started to pick up, based on your experience and perspective, I'd be really curious if you could help me understand. Boom. And now I ask the question in a way that comes across with curiosity. I'm not being condescending. It doesn't feel like a trap. And I give myself a chance to be surprised and maybe learn a valid point, a valid perspective, or a valid nuance before I then turn around and start, whether I realize it or not, imposing my perspective on somebody else.
One of the things that you say is that the person with the information controls the conversation. Even in power dynamic situations over the person with the title. How does that change how people approach difficult situations?
That's a great question. We call it staying out of the entitlement trap. All too often, if somebody is the parent, the boss, the leader, whoever, because of who I am, because of my role, I feel entitled to this information, so you need to give it to me. Well, giving you that information carries consequences. To your point, I might get a reaction I don't want to deal with. I might get trapped in a conversation I don't want. I might have to go do something that I don't want to do. It doesn't have to be go to jail, right? So what we have to remember is the people who have the information essentially have the choice of what to share and when to share it. So it's incumbent upon us to create the context where they feel more comfortable sharing it. Control is often equated to power and safety. If somebody doesn't feel like they have any control, they feel powerless and psychologically unsafe. So now we're having two different conversations. They're fighting for this power and safety. I just want the information. So if we can help give them that sense of power and safety in the conversation, it makes it easier for them to share information. So to try to directly answer your question after that little segue, If we know we really need information from somebody, they got it and we just don't have it. And either for the sake of time or in reality, they're the best person or maybe the only person to get it from, then I want to be really strategic and thoughtful about how, when, and where I ask for that information so they're more comfortable giving it to me. It's about giving them the experience they need, not imposing my authority on.
I'm going to use this when I'm trying to find next time my toddler hides my phone. It's like, where is it? You know where it is. Yeah, I can. It's that's a tricky one so often because again, it's like, um, yeah, I think oftentimes we have information or like we're in a power dynamic situation and it just feels like you kind of got to play some games to level it out, which is like it's like we're all brought up being like, I don't want to play games, like that's the best way to be. But then you start to realize, if you want to have strategy in your relationships, if you want to get where you're going in a graceful way, it's probably good to get better at these mind games.
Yeah, and even if we want to take the mind games all the way down to your toddler, no, I've never met your toddler, right? So here I am making another pile of assumptions. But if we think about why would a toddler hide his mom's phone? Well, because I want mom's attention and because I think it's a fun game. And around the toddler time, I don't know if he's two yet or where he is, but around that age is where they start to develop the need to find and test boundaries, and they want a little bit more power and a little bit more control. And so now, if I can realize he's hiding my phone because it's a game, because it gets the attention that he wants, because it gives him a little bit of power and control in the situation. Now, the quickest way for me to get my phone back is to feed into that. It's a fun game to hide mom's phone, isn't it? Yeah. Well, the last time you hid it in the couch, and the time before that, you hid it in the oven. Thankfully, I didn't turn it on. So I'm curious, where did you hide it this time? Is it in my bedroom? No, it's not in your bedroom. All right. Well, take me to where it is. And now we're getting at it from a different angle. Oftentimes, so time is the enemy of empathy. And this might be a cheesy way to explain it, but the more we feel pressure of time, the more impossible it becomes to truly empathize and understand where somebody else is coming from and how to take the best advantage, lack of a better phrase, of that. So the situation we're talking about now is kind of comical, hopefully, most of the time, right? It's not an emergency, but you need your phone back for any number of reasons. Your husband's supposed to be home from work already. He's at the grocery stores. Your mom's calling, whatever. A plane is landing. Somebody got to go pick up. So you're like, give me my phone now. Where's my phone? I need my phone right now. That as that stress level rises, we now completely vacate the ability to recognize what somebody else is thinking and feeling and what they need to experience to give us what we need faster. Where if we can step back, and I know it sounds cheesy, but take the deep breath, release the stress, now I can start to realize what somebody else is experiencing. Why are they behaving the way they are? And I can use their needs to get what I want.
The reason I love using children as examples for even sometimes complex ideas is because it drills it down to its simplest form, whereas it's almost like we want to layer up the excuses with other adults. Like we might be like, well, let me figure out the underlying motive for this, but then we've got this ego side of being like, they should just be mature enough to come at it straightforward. Like, come on, I'm not playing this game. Whereas it's so much easier to just feed in with a toddler. I've actually learned so much even about healing myself because a lot of the work we have to do with ourselves is kind of about going back to our inner child, the wounds we developed when we were little, and working with kids is just really helpful. So if anyone out there is listening, thinking like, well, I don't have kids, it's not relevant. No, you're missing out on a huge layer of social skills not having that, and sometimes knowing that first is going to help you with every other adult in the world. But the other thing I'm curious about is uh a lot of times where you're talking about having the outcome in mind. But a lot of our conversations, maybe it's not a business conversation or it's not a direct persuasive conversation. And we're just trying to meet new friends in town or get to know people on a deeper level. How do you find the hidden value that we might be missing in conversations in a more broad series of situations?
That's a great question. I'll answer it, I promise. To quickly tie a bow on the kid conversation too, let's also be honest that lots of adults still think and act like kids. And a lot of solutions that work with kids and approaches that work with kids work with adults as well. In the very recent past, I was working with a group of CEOs and got all their attention. And one of them said, "Hey, how'd you learn to get our attention like that?" And I was 100% serious. They laughed. I wasn't joking. I said, "Coaching T-ball." The same techniques it takes to wrangle a room full of CEOs are the same techniques it takes to wrangle a field full of 5 and 6 year olds. It's not different. It's the same. But when it comes to uncovering hidden value, you talk about, okay, so what if it's not like a formal conversation, it's not business, or it's not with like an important relationship, there's not an important topic on the table, we're looking to meet new friends or maybe get to know somebody a little bit better. Like those are outcomes in and of themselves, and if we break them down, well, I want to meet new friends. Okay, cool. It's going to be a little bit ironic because I've never been really great at making friends, if we're being honest. But now if we break that down, well, if I'm in a new area and I want to start making new friends, well, what do I look for in a friend? Like, what are my values? What's important to me? Is it values? Is it hobbies? Is it social schedule? Is it whatever? So now, as I'm interacting with people, my conversations are directed towards those things. So I wouldn't want to just meet you at a networking event and be like, "Hey, Melissa, my name is Mike. Great to meet you. I'm new in town. I don't have any friends. Hey, I'm just curious. What are you into?" Like that probably isn't going to go very far. But as we're having our conversations, now I want to start to pick up on values, personal interests, things like that. So if I'm in a networking event and a server walks by with a tray and drops a fork, well, I know I'm going to pick it up, but maybe I'm going to wait for 2 seconds to see if you go to pick it up first. So now, if you pick it up, could that be emblematic of your values, that you're helpful of other people? You appreciate those that work hard. You appreciate those that make your life easy. So you're willing to take 2 seconds out of your day and pick up the fork for them. Or when they drop the fork, you just kind of scowl at them and laugh like, "Oh, they're not even good at their job. We're done." Because if you're going to disrespect the people that work hard to make your life easier, we don't have enough in common to overcome that. Like, I'll be very professional and respectful to you every time I see you, but I'm not going out of my way to make friends with you. So if we can understand what our outcomes are and the important pieces of those outcomes, if I'm getting to know somebody better, why do I want to get them to know somebody better? Is it because I think they could be a business connection? Is it because I think they could be a good friend? Is it because I think there might be a romantic interest? Whatever it is, okay, same thing. So now, as I'm participating in these conversations, listening for intelligence, what could be the indications that we share some of these same values traits that I find important?
As a tangent, you want to know what I love about people that aren't good at making friends or feel like they're socially awkward? I feel like they're all the people that bring the best science and practical tips for doing that exact thing because it didn't come naturally to them. I'm thinking of, for example, Vanessa Van Edwards. I love her books and I think she's a genius with the science of behavior. She has a website, Science of People, but that's her story. She was just like horrible at making friends. And so she's like, I'm going to get to the science of it and figure it out. And I just love everything she brings to the table too. But I, I see that. And I also think a step that people miss when they're trying to figure out if their values are aligned with somebody else's is I feel like so often people are judging someone else by their values before they actually even know what they stand for. So many people miss that, like, okay, who am I? What are my, if I had top 5 values, what are they? And why is that important to me? And what am I working toward in this life? And when you actually know those, you have more respect for the values of other people that might be different than yours. Whereas if you don't know those and you're just like, oh man, why didn't they do this? Blah, blah, blah. You're most often reacting based off of the expectations that you have for yourself that may have been inherited from somebody else or the way people have treated you for your reactions to things versus getting down to like the core of who you are and who somebody else is and why those things matter.
Beautifully said. I couldn't agree anymore. And the one thing that I would add to that is single factor decisions are deadly. So, like, if I'm not clear on my values, if I'm not clear on the context of the situation, and I start making decisions based on one factor and one factor alone, there's a really good chance that, again, I'm being exclusionary, not inclusionary. There's more nuance, there's more to the picture, there's more to learn and decide.
Mm, that's true. And that goes back to situational awareness, but also having more opportunities to ask people the questions that matter. I'm thinking of a conversation I got into with a good friend, and there was just an area where we both had really different beliefs, and we could tell that about each other based on even what we've said on social media. So we just kind of didn't broach that. And we just ended up spending a weekend together recently, and it came up, and he got to see where I was coming from. I got to see where he was coming from, and we could see exactly why each other was on opposite sides of this. And it really bridged this seemingly unbridgeable divide, because it wasn't about the specifics anymore. It wasn't about the thing. It was actually about the values underneath, which ironically aligned very well.
Just what you said, the values underneath. How many conversations, relationships, meetings, fill in the blank, would have ended differently for all of us if we had dug for what was underneath? And you asked the question earlier about hidden value. Often that's where the hidden value lies. It's not at the surface, but it's getting down to the fears, the motivations, the values, the goals, the history. Understanding that helps us really grasp where somebody else is coming from, what we have in common, what we can build together. When you look at the universality of the human experience, we all have way more in common than we don't. And if we can figure out how to get there, we'd all be better.
Well, I love leaving listeners with one thing to think about or thing to do, action item this week to sort of bring some of this into their reality. What would you leave them with?
I think we've already touched on a lot of the great ones, from saving face to saving face, focusing on outcomes, being patient. And we've talked about a lot of them. I'm going to cheat. I thought I was going to cheat and leave you with two. Where did oh yeah. One I just touched on real quick. Ask the question, please walk me through. Please walk me through the process. Please walk me through what you were thinking. Please walk me through the alternatives. Please walk me through. That question will unlock doors you never saw coming, and it will make it harder for other people to shut you out of conversations. Please walk me through. The other thing I thought about saying earlier and I didn't, so here's what I'm cheating. I'm going to get two in here, is please don't suffer a death by last word. In a lot of these conversations we're talking about, we feel that emotional need to have the last word, to get that win. And it kills us in the long term because we're shutting people down. We're ending on an argument. We're being parental or being judgmental at the end of the conversation. So the next time you're in a conversation, you feel like you just need to get that last word in, swallow it, keep it to yourself. You think it's funny, walk away, don't say it, don't suffer a death.
Those are great. And so for listeners that are interested in learning more about you and your book, where's the best place for them to connect?
Appreciate you asking. Thank you so much. They can go to disciplinedlistening.com. That's where they can learn more about the book. That's where they can see my interviews. There's a lot of information there. The book's available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon if they'd like to pick it up online. If they're looking to learn more about me, they can go to michaelreddington.com. That's where they can see all my online media. If they'd like to connect on social media, I'm only on LinkedIn. So Michael Reddington, CFI on LinkedIn. I'd be very happy to connect with any one of your listeners. Please tell me that you listened here. I'd be happy to start a conversation with any of you. And if anyone's interested in learning more about the programs that we facilitate for our clients at Inquasive, they can find that at inquasive.com, which is INQUASIVE.com.